I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. Hello, everybody. It's just me this week. I have mentioned quite a bit that I have a lot of travel this month, and I was able to solidify some times and guests, but this week I just was too much. Couldn't make it work. So what I'm going to do this time is give you a little bit of personal life update, as I always do, and then kind of a teaser on some upcoming shows and who I've got coming up for all the people listening, get a sneak peek. And then, of course, I got to give you some top stories because I can't have you not be in the know with the water cooler talk, you know? So that's what you'll have from me today. So to start off, I remember I said I wasn't going to Bumbershoot. Well, actually, I got a hold of a free ticket. So I went by myself, loved it. So cool. There's so much going on. There was concerts. BB Stockwell is one of my favorites. There was a comedy show I went to, a fashion show, an aerialist, skateboarders, fake wrestling. I mean, that's just a couple of things that I saw. I had so much fun on my little solo date. So props to Bumbershoot. I will say my one complaint, and I think they're getting a lot of heat for this, is that there's no reentry. And that was hard because BB, she was on at 1 p.m. And that just meant that I had to stay the entire day if I wanted to see the other show. And that really hurts some of those bands and acts that are happening earlier in the day because people don't want to spend their entire day there. It also makes me think about kind of the impact on restaurants and all of those retailers and whatever that's in the area, is that people aren't going to go to a show and leave and maybe have dinner somewhere else and come back. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen there. I am trying to get some of the planners for festivals in Seattle on for a kind of a special episode later in October. So hopefully I can ask them directly. The other thing that happened this past week, I should say, I was in Boston for another client, not somebody I usually work for, but they hired me on just to work on site for the event. I don't really have any good stories for that, but I made money and that's good. My other trips that I've got coming up is Dallas, Texas, and then San Diego and Atlanta. So Dallas and Atlanta are going to be for work for a different client, and San Diego's for fun because, as many of you know, I went to University of San Diego. I'm really excited about that. And I guess I could just say now that that's one of the upcoming guests. So I reached out to one of my former I was a comm major. I reached out to one of my former comm professors, and I asked him to be on the podcast, and he said yes. So I'm going to fly down there because, as you know, I think in-person episodes are just so much more fun. You get more out of it, and I don't need an excuse to go down to my college. One thing about me is that I loved college. I was in every club that you could ever imagine. And I know there's I feel like higher education is kind of a hot topic right now of, is it worth it? Is it worth the money? There's all this debate, and then I know Harvard and Trump and the lawsuit and all that kind of stuff. So we might get a little bit into that, but I wanted to kind of tackle how we as a society consume news and how that's changed over the years. He hosted a class called Media and Conflict that really kind of changed how I viewed things. So that'll be really fun. He also was like, well, while you're down here, do you want a guest lecture? And I said, absolutely. Do I know what I'm going to talk about? No, but I shall figure it out. I'm a little intimidated to talk to college students because I feel like I'll be like, I started a podcast. I'll be like, well, F you. I started a YouTube channel. It makes more than you. So I'll be like, oh, cool. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, Dallas, San Diego, and Atlanta is my travel. The other personal life update is that I did get asked to speak at a mayoral debate, which was really cool. That's going to be put on by Formidable and Seattle City Club. I've previously moderated a panel for Seattle City Club. And as I think many of you know, my former boss and friend, Emily Parker, runs Formidable. So I don't totally know my full role. I have a prep call with them, but I know that I will be at least asking a question. So if you have a question that I should ask the mayor, so basically it's Bruce Harrell. If you guys aren't familiar, Bruce Harrell is the current mayor. He is running for re-election, and then there is a person running against him, which is Katie Wilson. So if you have a question that you want me to ask, please let me know. I'm going to be doing a deep dive into figuring out what I should ask them. The other thing that happened recently is that KUOW approached me to be on their podcast, which is so cool. I feel like I'm so hesitant to call myself a journalist. I feel like I just like to talk shit about the news. And I guess maybe that's a journalist, but it felt very validating for them to reach out. So I have to do a couple calls with them before it's actually official. So that is exciting. And let's see. The last personal life update is that I'm trying to get a logo design. I don't know if you guys have been through that process, but it's super fun. I gave her this like Pinterest board that made no sense. And I was like, I want the logo to feel like it has a tattoo. And it's like, what does that even mean? The logo breaks the rules, but doesn't. Anyway, I've gotten it down to what I think will be the final one for it, what's called as RC Productions. Basically, I do so many random things. Like I produce a stand-up comedy show. I've produced concerts. Obviously, I do corporate event planning a lot and worked at festivals. And I'm producing this lesbian event. So I wanted something and this podcast, and I need something that kind of captures all of that. RC Productions is what I have my LLC as financially. If you're curious, see, my middle name is Rachel Christine, so that's why the RC. And then my grandma called me RC. My mom didn't like that because she named me Rachel for a reason and she liked the name. But my grandma called me RC, and she owned her own construction business way back in the day. So it's a little bit of a nod to her, a nod to my nickname that no one ever called me actually except for her. And I just felt like RH is already kind of taken, right? Because RH Restoration Hardware. Is there RC Cola? Yes, but whatever. Anyway, I'll be launching that design soon. Okay, so that's enough about me. Moving on, what to expect in the upcoming episodes. So there's really only, I want to say 4 spots open. So if you know of somebody that you want to hear from, or even if you don't know them, you're just like, I'd really like to hear from this kind of person, please let me know. I kind of purposely held out on these 4 just because I like to give space for, a random person I meet at a bar that I'm like, you should be on my podcast. And I don't want to totally fill it up, or if there's something super relevant that comes up. But to give you a piece of what's coming in the future, we've got Michelle Merriweather of Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. That's a nonprofit that provides services for people of color. That's going to be next week. I'm actually going to do it virtually because I'll be gone. And then my former professor, as I mentioned. And 2 more that I'm really excited about is the founder of Hot Tub Boats. I'm sure you guys have seen them out in Lake Union. And I just think it's a super creative idea. And I just want to hear more about kind of like the business process of, starting that and how it's grown and all that. I know there's 2 companies that do it in Lake Union, but this one is Hot Tub Boats. And the other one is the general manager for Olympic Athletic Club. That gym is blowing up. I feel like every single one of my friends is going to that gym. And so I want to talk to him not only about Olympic Athletic Club and like why that one's a little bit different and unique. They started a women's gym, which I haven't really seen here in Seattle. But I also kind of want to talk about the kind of journey of gyms and where the industry of gyms are. So those are a couple things that are coming and I'm excited about. So yeah. All right, let's get into the top stories. I'm going to be super quick on this because it is 10:45 on a Saturday, and this does come out on Sunday. Am I a procrastinator? Yes. Okay, so restaurant closures, they're closing. That's what's happening. Rising costs, we've talked about this a lot. We talked about it with, most recently, Chad McKay, and there's just rising costs to operate a restaurant, rising minimum wage. I think since the pandemic, more people aren't going out, apparently, and it's just less predictable. So we've got Mamnoon in Capitol Hill closes after 13 years, and we've got Outer Planet Brewing in Capitol Hill closing after 10 years. There's an article that I'll link in the show notes from Seattle Times talking about 5 Seattle area restaurants that are either closing or pivoting. I also was privy to a list. It's off the record, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but they were kind of tracking how many restaurants have closed between 2020 and 2025. And what was really concerning to me is that 2024 and 2025 were pretty close. We're rivaling the level of 2020 closures. And I know it can be hard to analyze that data because maybe a restaurant fails, but that it takes a while for that actually to close. I know Chad McKay was talking about how long the leases are, things like that. But why are we so close to a worldwide pandemic level closures in 2024 and 2025? So I want to do kind of more of a deep dive on that maybe in the future, but I just wanted to bring that up in this episode that there are still closures happening every day. Okay, next article is Climate Pledge is changing their cups. So Climate Pledge is switching from those, you guys, I think you've all seen them, but like the silver aluminum cups, those are actually recyclable, not reusable. So those are the recyclable aluminum cups. I mean, I guess you could steal it and use it at your home. But anyway, they're moving to these reusable plastic cups, and Moda Center in Portland, they've done it before. And the headline, shout out to Rick Morgan, I like that headline, was, switches to reusable cups, but please don't steal them. Apparently, Portland sees an 80% return rate, which is actually I think pretty high. I don't know. I feel like people like to steal cups. I don't, but I think a lot of people do. And what's interesting, it takes 1 to 2 days for a cup to go from the bin. So when you're done with the cup, you put it in this like special bin. And then it goes through a cleaning process. It takes 1 to 2 days for that to happen and come back to the arena. On average, do you want to guess how many cups are used per event? I'll give you a second to think about it. It's 7,000, which we have to kind of think about, okay, how big is the arena? Whatever. The arena holds 17,000 to 18,000 people. So I was very surprised by this, but then you have to think about, depends on probably what drink you're ordering, because I think a lot of the drinks come in like cans and bottles anyway. So this is probably cocktails and such, or like specific bars that give it out. Anyway, so that's Climate Pledge, moving to reusable plastic cups. Next article, Home Street Bank and Mechanics Bank merge. So I bring this up because we've talked about this at least twice, I think. But Home Street Bank was going to merge with that Denver-based First Sun Capital, who owns Sunflower Bank. But regulators actually ended up rejecting it. And eventually they ended the deal. They kept trying to make different things happen, and then they couldn't do it. Mark Mason, the CEO of Home Street Bank, said that he thinks it's because the banks were too similar in size, but who knows? So Home Street sold Ginnie Mae loan to someone else. It sold its real estate loans to Bank of America, and now eventually is combining with Mechanics Bank. And the headline of the article is that it's actually going to take the Mechanics Bank name, which I don't love. Mechanics Bank, it just sounds stupid. It feels like when you get married, you guys should be able to choose like whoever has the best name. And I don't think it's Mechanics. Anyway, Mark Mason, the CEO, he's going to move into a consulting role. Okay, moving on. We're going quickly. Former AWS CEO goes to, you guessed it, private equity. So Adam Selipsky, he was the former CEO of Amazon Web Services, and he's now been named Senior Technology and Artificial Intelligence Strategy Advisor. Oof, that's a mouthful. For a private equity firm called KKR and Company. So Adam, brief history on him. He worked for Amazon, and then he left to be the CEO of Tableau, Seattle tech company here. Then Tableau was then acquired by Salesforce. He stayed for a little bit, but then he eventually rejoined Amazon. Andy Jassy was the AWS CEO and then became Amazon CEO. So that's when Adam stepped in to his role in 2021 and then left last year. So now he's at private equity, which, by the way, I bought this new private equity book called These Are the Plunderers, How Private Equity Runs and Wrecks America by Gretchen Morgensen. I'm really excited to read that. As you know, I've talked about my feelings about private equity, but I want to have a little bit more data and facts to back my emotions. Okay, 2 more for you guys, and then I got to go to bed. Waymo is coming, so I posted about this on the podcast Instagram page. Waymo, as a reminder, is a subsidiary of Google, or technically Alphabet. They are starting with a limited fleet, and they're going to operate when they're, quote, permitted to do so. So Seattle's they're not legally able to do it here yet. It's already available in cities like LA, Phoenix, San Francisco, Atlanta, and like a handful of others. Waymo cars, here's the thing. It was kind of like, would you trust getting into a Waymo car? That was a discussion we had at Happy Hour on Friday. Would you trust getting into them or not? And it's interesting that 88% fewer crashes compared to an average human driver. And that kind of changed my mind a little bit. There was a KUOW interview where they were saying, okay, yeah, but can the Waymo car handle Seattle roads and conditions with the rain? Because they were talking about how like their car has the automatic, like, oh, you've gone into somebody else's lane, but it doesn't work in Seattle when it's raining and dark because our roads are tough. The other thing is that the episode on KUOW said that it's more expensive. I need to research this a little bit more, but they said it could be more expensive than like a Lyft or an Uber, which I don't know how that's possible since we're number one, as I'd mentioned in last week's episode. But yeah, it could be more expensive. And then they were saying like, well, some people might pay for that so they don't have to freaking talk to somebody else, talk to their driver, which I'm extroverted. I am, but sometimes I feel like I should be paid for the active listening that I've been doing in an Uber sometimes, because it's like, oh yeah, no, yeah, anyway. My thought on this is, what problem are we solving? I guess it's crashes, but I don't know. I'm not that stoked about it. I don't feel like collectively, I feel like, are we spending all the resources on the right things? There's so many issues in this world, and I don't feel like the biggest issue is that people are driving cars. Like, I feel like there's other things that are going on. The other thing I think about is Waymo going to be profitable? So we talked about this with Lee McMillan about the Reach Now program with the BMW's Reach Now rental car and how expensive it was. So it's also, if you guys have watched the Uber documentaries and the Uber shows and stuff like that, is that they get so much funding, and Waymo has so much funding. And there was one article that said they're going to be profitable in 7 to 8 years, maybe, I guess. But it kind of reminds me. So Uber, it used to be quite cheap. And then when they had to start to turn a profit, everything got a little bit more expensive. And then you see that with I've brought this up before, but the Movie Pass documentary, where everything was so cheap to see a million movies. And then when their funding ran out, they had to kind of increase their costs. So for Waymo, I'm like, okay, is this a sustainable business model? Like, are you really actually going to be able to make money? How much is each car? All that kind of stuff in the tech and whatever. Things to think about. Okay, our last one. I've learned my lesson. I'm going to end on positive things from now on. So I'm going to try at least. The new Lumen Field features. So kind of businessy, but also just fun. So there's new food options at Lumen Field. I won't go into detail on those, but there's some new food options. And also cocktails are allowed in the seats now, which is cool. I wonder what the reason was before to not allow them, because it's not, you could still get them. Now you're just making them chug in one room before they can go sit down. So that feels worse, right? The other thing is undercover police will be dressed in opposing teams' jerseys to make sure the code of conduct is followed. The fact that it's all out there in the public now, and I feel like kind of ruins that, but we'll see. All fans are going to get a green pom-pom in their seats for the first game. It sounded like, I don't think for every game. 2 more Amazon Just Walk Out markets will be added to the club level. And lastly, there's a new video wall at the south end of the stadium to show some in-game stats and such. Okay, so that has been your Seattle news update. And I'll end with what I ask everybody is, what do you do when you don't feel like doing your job? And that is really relevant because that was my entire day today. I flew back Friday morning, napped a bit, saw a friend for a drink, and today I've just been rotting and watching TV. I watched the Beanie Baby movie. I hadn't seen it before with Elizabeth Banks. It was really kind of the rise and fall of Beanie Babies. Anyway, that's not the point. Okay, so what did I do today to motivate myself? I am on Marco Polo with a friend, and so she was kind of my accountability buddy. And I said, Janae, this is my last Marco Polo. I have to get up after this. Please don't tell me to get up after this. And then my other one is I always give myself a reward, even if it's like a small reward. So I was like, if I do this, then I get to drink 1 White Claw if I do all this, or 1 cider. And then if I finish this podcast episode, I get to read my new book, which is Careless People. I don't know if anybody's read it before, but apparently it's a ex-Meta employee who was pretty high up, and she wrote this kind of tell-all whistleblower type memoir. And people hadn't really heard about it until Meta sued her and was like really trying to get it out of circulation. And it kind of created, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Streisand effect, but it's basically like, because they sued and because they made it a big deal and said they didn't want it, then it became a big deal. And if they wouldn't have done anything, like nobody probably would have read it. So anyway, I bought it. I haven't started it yet, but that's my reward if I get through this episode. So, all right, that is enough from me. What am I doing this weekend? I'm doing nothing. I'm doing nothing again tomorrow. I'm trying to not do anything. And then I fly out Tuesday for Dallas. So check back next week with Michelle Merriweather of Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. And I'll see you guys later. Bye. This has been The Weekly with production assistance from Nick Patry. If you liked what you heard, rate us and write a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. We love listener feedback. So if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at info@theweeklyseattle.com. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We'll see you next time.